Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. While we're getting settled in here, feel free to drop a little hello in the chat, like so many have already done. Um, and yeah, share where you're from if you're open to it. I'm Niko. I'm happy to be here. I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
And I'm Lex, and I'm in Denver, Colorado. Happy to be here as well. Thanks for joining us.
So we're gonna give it another minute or two. We're gonna give it one more minute before we actually get started. We have 32 joined already, which is amazing. Um, just looking at the chat, I'm seeing not only people from all across the country, but also people from international as well. We have Croatia, we have a Norway person, love that. Um, from the far country of Oregon, there's a few folks. um, yeah, this is awesome.
We have
Door
local
County,
Broomfield.
yeah, some places that I've been to that are beautiful. Alberta, Canada, Door County, Wisconsin, amazing. Um, so yeah, all over. It seems like people all over are interested in psychedelics, and so I'm pumped to talk to you all about it. Um, yeah, so what I wanted to really cover at the beginning here is that I have used psychedelics for more than the past decade, and most of the time that I have used them have been not in a therapeutic setting. They've been with friends in the woods or by myself. And I've found so much healing from that. And I always walk away with an epiphany around how I could or should change, um, or how I want to change. But when I have done it in a therapeutic setting with intentionality, with preparation, and with integration afterwards, I've had 10x the impact. So if I get one epiphany from doing it on my own in the woods, I'll get 10 by doing it with a therapist. And so while I absolutely believe in the uses of psychedelics across the spectrum from going to concerts to sitting with a therapist, if you're really in this to actually find psychedelic healing, to find healing from whatever might be ailing you, going this intentional route is really, really important. Um, so with that, my name is Niko Skievaski. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Althea, and I am so excited to have this conversation with you all today and introduce Lex, who is our care navigator and actually works with folks who are exploring the use of psychedelics. Lex, give yourself a little intro. Who are you?
Hi, I am Lex, and as Niko said, I am our psychedelic care navigator. Basically, just means that I'm helping people determine and decide if they're feeling like a fit for psychedelic therapy in the legal model, and then answer their questions that they have, which usually people have a lot of questions going into this. And then on the side of this, in my other work, I am a microdosing and integration coach. And a big reason why I got into this work in general and what really drives me is I had a very intentional psychedelic experience when I first started with the medicine of 5-MeO. And I thought that I was prepared and did the entire journey and came out the other side realizing that I was not ready. Not only was I not fully prepared in the way that I should have been or thought I should have been, but I had no support on the other side of it. And it was incredibly destabilizing. And so at the end of what was truly a long 6 months of trying to figure out my way back to some centeredness, I realized that I was meant to be supporting people through not having to go through that experience that I had. So it's a big reason for my why here and why I support people through this process. Amazing. So why preparation really matters. We have we have run the PPS, the psychedelic preparedness survey, and I think hundreds of people have taken this, and so many people understand that the psychedelic journey is profound and unexpected, but a lot of people have rated and rated themselves that they don't feel prepared and that they don't actually have the support in place to feel comfortable going through one of these experiences. And so preparation is an important piece of the equation because though the medicine opens the door and though the journey is incredibly important, it's not just about the dose. It's about how you set your intention going into the experience and then how you integrate it on the other side. Integration is just a fancy way for saying reaping the benefits of the insights and the awareness and integrating it and putting it into your daily life. And your outcomes are really extended and stack up with quality prep and support, which is what a big piece of the legal model is helping people with. So we're going to go through the science of psilocybin. Niko will sort of go through an overview of what that looks like. And then we'll talk about how to prepare. We'll go a little bit deeper into the science and what the actual neuroplasticity window looks like post a journey, legal access costs, and the importance of finding a facilitator. We'll do a Q&A. You can ask Q&A or questions in the chat. Niko, is it like a question mark that they can click? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there's the chat functionality, which we've been chatting in, which is lovely. There's also if you see on the right, there's a question mark where you can actually ask questions. And so put your questions in there, because once there's questions in there, you can actually vote up and down other people's questions. And we'll go through that list either throughout or at the end. I'll moderate the questions and bring them up to Lex and address them when it makes sense in the session. So put the actual questions you want us to address in that tab. And then, yeah, use the chat for fun. Yeah.
Perfect. And then, so we'll go through those, we'll pick some questions and answer them, and then we'll go through next steps and resources that Althea has.
Cool. Yeah, and you'll also see at the bottom of the screen, there'll be some links that pop up as we go out, and it's just a way for us to share links. And so Lex mentioned the psychedelic preparedness scale, and I threw that in there if it's something that would interest you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but if you want to check it out. But without further ado, let's start with the evidence. We really wanted to kind of start with this by grounding ourselves in the science here. We are in a new modern era of psychedelic research in the past 15, 20 years. Psychedelics, of course, were coined and popularized in the 50s and then 60s, really started the cultural movement of the 60s. And then were kind of put on the back burner from a research standpoint for decades. And as some of those kids in the 60s became PhD neuropsychopharmacologists, they decided to pick up the psychedelics again and start doing research on it. And so there's been now, to date, there's been dozens of peer-reviewed studies, including some of the most notable medical schools and institutions in the world, like Johns Hopkins University, NYU, Imperial College of London. And a lot of their findings have suggested that psychedelics, particularly when combined with psychotherapy, can lead to significant and lasting reductions in symptoms of treatment-resistant depression, of PTSD, of anxiety. For example, psilocybin in particular has been shown to produce a rapid and sustained improvements in major depressive disorder, including treatment-resistant depression. MDMA has gone through clinical trials focusing on PTSD. And then ketamine has been approved by the FDA, a form of ketamine for treatment-resistant depression, and has really opened the door to a lot of other psychedelic research in the land of psychiatry. I do want to just make the quick distinction that in psychedelics, we talk about the classical psychedelics, which are specifically serotonin 2A agonists. So these are medicines that work on your serotonin system. MDMA and ketamine are pharmacologically distinct, but because of the type of experience that they occasion, they're often lumped together in this world of psychedelics. And we can talk about kind of the differences between those and when some might make sense for different types of ailments. But in general today, we're going to go deep on psilocybin because that is what we're seeing in the legal space emerging. So going to point number two, with psychedelics and the research that's been going on, there's been a lot of looking into how these things actually work. And it appears that they work by temporarily disrupting kind of our default neural patterns, our default ways of thinking. And they promote neuroplasticity, fostering senses of connectedness, creating mystical experiences. Functional MRIs have shown that there's a decrease in the brain's default mode network, which is an area that's associated with like rumination or self-criticism or depressive thought loops. And the way I think about it is the types of things that psychedelics can help with are anything that might be associated with a negative thought pattern, a loop. And if we think about depression, that's often thought patterns that are associated with the past, whereas anxiety are thought patterns associated with the future. And so psychedelics can disrupt those thought patterns, and you can replace them with something else, which we'll certainly talk about in the integration aspects. Another thing that research has pointed at is the importance of set and setting, which is a term that's often used in this space. And it's really about, not just that you're taking a substance and that substance is changing something in your brain. It's really focused on it changes something in your brain, but your thought, your mindset going into that and the setting that you're within have a huge impact on the actual therapeutic outcomes that are received. And so it's very different than a lot of other medicines and how it works in that, for antibiotic, for instance, you take a medicine and then the medicine works. With psychedelics, so much more goes into it, in that you can take this medicine, but the experience you have on it and what you do with it afterwards are really driving the therapeutic outcomes. They open the possibility for therapeutic outcomes. Psychedelics in general, from a safety profile and caveats perspective, when they're administered in controlled settings, which all of the research experiments have been in these controlled clinical trial settings, they have shown to have remarkably low adverse events, in that there's been low toxicity, there's no overdoses on these types of medicines. They have non-addictive properties, in that people aren't wanting to do it again right afterwards. And they have very few physiological risks. That being said, they are not without risks. And it's particularly for individuals with certain psychiatric conditions, or people without adequate support in their general lives. And so research consistently emphasizes the need for proper screening, for skilled facilitation, and for ethical safeguards around how these medicines are being used. So again, more reasons to work with professionals if you're thinking about using psychedelics. Around moving from hype to humility, psychedelics are often in the media these days. There's a lot of buzz around them. They're often portrayed with narratives of being a panacea, and that it can be, dramatic transformation and miracle cures. Researchers and practitioners caution against viewing psychedelics as a silver bullet. The most promising studies view psychedelics not as the cure, but really as a catalyst, a tool that can accelerate healing when paired with professional care, with proper integration, with community support, and with a readiness for actually moving into these types of experiences. And beyond the clinical experience and beyond the therapeutic settings, there's also been a lot of research focusing on using psychedelics to point at benefits for dealing with grief, for dealing with struggles with your identity, and for relational healing, whether that's with your family or your community or friends. It's a lot harder to quantify these types of benefits, but there's a lot of research that have qualitative evidence around the impact psychedelics can have in these kind of softer areas. Specifically, as I mentioned, we're going to dive deeper into psilocybin therapy. So psilocybin in particular is the active psychedelic ingredient, the active compound in magic mushrooms. And so there's thousands of different types of mushrooms that have psilocybin in them. These are mushrooms that you can find growing in the forest near you, in your backyard. They're all over the place. I wouldn't recommend just trying mushrooms that you find, but many of them do have psilocybin. Many mushrooms have other chemicals that can be dangerous, but psilocybin mushrooms, as I mentioned, have been shown to be physiologically safe, non-addictive in this controlled setting. And psilocybin in particular, a lot of the research has been pointing to beneficial therapeutic outcomes for depression, anxiety, for PTSD, for addiction and substance abuse, and end of life distress. So it's often used in palliative care settings with terminally ill patients for them to kind of understand what their future might look like. Psilocybin is one of the classical psychedelics in that it is a serotonin agonist. So it works on that serotonin system, and it disrupts those rigid thought patterns. And then again, in the research focused on psilocybin, it couples preparation, the actual skilled facilitation session where you actually utilize the substance, and then integration. And those three steps seem to be critical in actually creating the therapeutic outcomes that are discussed. Often common within these settings as well is when you actually take the medicine, you go internal, and ways that facilitators have used to help people go internal is having people wear an eye mask. So instead of being stimulated by outside stimulus, you're going internal and working on whatever might be inside your consciousness. And music can help with that too, to help kind of guide the journey internally. Woo! So that was a big, quick overview of the science and what the research has been saying. I'm going to kick it back over to Lex to kind of dive deeper into what that actually looks like in this 3-act model that we talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Niko. That was a great overview. So the 3-act model is a big piece of how this medicine sustains the outcomes that people are looking for. It really incorporates preparation, the journey itself, and integration as one system. And the idea is that it's a story, right? Like every great story has a beginning, middle, and end, and this is exactly how this model is set up. When we prepare intentionally, we sort of set ourselves up for a more intentional experience just in general versus walking into a clinic, taking the medicine, and then going on with our day. It's a very different model. Like Niko was saying, this isn't as similar to pharmaceuticals and being prescribed a medicine and then going on with life. It's really intentional and meant to be a big part of the experience. And preparation itself informs how the integration is going to look on the other side. So I don't know what the statistic is on this, but there's an understanding that the more we prepare in the beginning of before the journey, it is much more likely that we're going to have an easier and more easeful time in integration because of the intentionality and the actual care that goes into that. You can skip to the next slide, Niko. Perfect. One of the things that I think is the most interesting about this work, and just to go a little bit more into the science, is this idea of the neuroplastic window. So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to adapt and change. And it was believed that our brains couldn't actually change after we had fully developed. So after age, 26, that we were like old dogs, we couldn't be taught new tricks. And it's pretty recent discoveries that we know that that is not true. And so after you take a psychedelic, depending on the dose, you have a 7 to 21 day window of increased neuroplasticity. And this happens because of what happens with these serotonin receptors. So the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors are basically turned on and activated when you take a psychedelic like psilocybin. And it creates this cascade of chemical effects in the brain. So the default mode network quiets down, like Niko was saying. That's really where the ego is stored, where we self-judge, where we have ruminating thoughts. That part of the brain starts to quiet. And it also increases our ability to feel our senses more. So this is why we have like hallucinations and perceptual changes, because typically our brains are smart enough in our regular lives to know that the information of being able to feel all of our nerve endings on every part of our body at any given time is not helpful or important for us to know unless it's a breach of our safety. And so in our regular lives, we sort of don't notice things like the wind blowing on our face at all moments, or how the air feels, or these things that we have this filter on that just creates more of a ability to focus on the task in front of us. When we take a psychedelic, that changes. So that sensory, perceptual sensory filter sort of opens up and we get to feel a lot more. And what also happens during that time is BDNF, which is brain derived neurotrophic factor, which is kind of like miracle grow for new neural pathways, is released because of these 5-HT2A receptors being activated. And so now we have all of these new thoughts happening. Neural pathways are talking to each other that don't usually talk to each other. And BDNF is being flooded into the system. And so it creates this perfect environmental condition in the brain for these new neural pathways to actually form and create and strengthen. It's not that they weren't there before. It's not a matter of creating new neural pathways. It's lighting up old ones and strengthening ones that already exist that maybe haven't been worked as often. And this is why the phase after the experience and preparing for the experience itself is so incredibly important. If you go into this experience without intention and then you come out the other side, there's still neuroplasticity happening, but you want to wire for the most success and whatever your outcomes are that you're looking for are. So this neuroplastic window is that 7 to 21 days where you have a really good chance of creating new habits that really support the way you want to move through your experience and what you're looking to overcome during it. Perfect. And I love to use the ski slope metaphor for this reason. So, a dose day or taking a psychedelic substance like psilocybin, it's basically as if this mountain has fresh powder and all of the old tracks are covered up and there is no historical data that's really present on that day. It's opening up new opportunities. And as I was saying, this happens either way. It happens whether we prepare for the experience or we don't prepare for the experience. The preparation really influences what tracks you're going to lay down. So it's sort of like visualizing before you take the pass on the mountain where you want to go, and then the integration is actually taking the action and doing it. And so if we think about this actually happening in our brains, we have this really beautiful opportunity. And if you live in Colorado at all, this is probably lands really hard for you because this is like the best possible experience that you can have. Fresh powder, fresh tracks coming down the mountain, and your integration is where you're skiing those new neural pathways. They get stronger the more tracks go down them, the more skiers pass through them. And it's the same with how our brains work.
Real quick, there's a question in in our from our audience that says, can you give brief insight into the preparation process that could help get the most out of the experience? That's exactly where you're going. So I'm going to hit that we're answering that question now and let you dive into it.
Yay. Yeah, so let's talk about the logistics of preparing for a psychedelic experience. So, this is a bigger overview of what preparation actually looks like. And set up in this pyramid, it's important to note that foundationally, your setting and your physical being is one of the most important things that you can prepare for the experience. So though psilocybin doesn't have the more traditional dieta like ayahuasca does, if you're familiar, it is really important to make sure that your physical body is ready for the medicine to come into it so that you can have the most intentional experience. There's always a lot of focus on intention and mindset, which is the top of the pyramid. But actually, if we focus a lot on the bottom first, where we lay that foundation, then we can move up the pyramid with more intention and with more opportunity to blossom at the top. And so if you want to take a screenshot of this, I would suggest that just because it's an important piece of the model. We're going to dive into it a little bit further in the next slides.
Get your screenshot now.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving on.
Perfect. So as Niko was mentioning, set and setting, it's a buzzwords in the psychedelic space that people are pretty familiar with. Thank you to Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. The set is really your inner landscape, your inner world, your mindset going into the work. It's the beliefs and stories that you have and maybe you're trying to rewrite, or maybe you have and you're not aware of. any fears, how you feel going into it, what's lingering in your life. Anything related to the mind and how you're thinking about your experience going into it is going to be your set. And then your setting is everything external of you, everything like environment, who your facilitator is, how safe you feel, all of these aspects that are keeping your physical being safe. It is in our physiology to keep ourselves safe at all times. And so both these in tandem intertwine and interweave as the experience is going. But if we focus on preparing the set and the setting going into the experience, we have a much better chance of not having what some people call a bad trip. Typically, a bad trip will almost always come back to one of these things not having intentionally been poured into prior to the experience. Perfect. And a big piece of that is setting an intention. So, like I mentioned, the top of that pyramid, your mindset and setting an intention is it's the anchor for your experience. The visualization I'll give you in this moment is think of if you had like a picture frame, like an empty picture frame with the back of it missing, and you were able to sort of walk around with this picture frame, like viewing the world through it. That's your intention for the experience. So if you think about this as you go into it and you set this intention, and then you have this experience and you're looking at it through the frame of this intention, and then you get to the other side of the experience in the integration period, and you're still holding up this picture frame. There's a thread of continuity that gets drawn between your preparation and the integration so that you can actually look at the experience from this lens that has some form to it. I find that people who go through the experience and maybe recreationally just like take medicine and then don't have an intention, they come to the other side and they're like, what was that? Like, that doesn't, there's no, I can't find the sense in that there's too much going on. If there is no guidance on what we're looking at, we're just looking at it through an open field of endless possibilities, it will get confusing and it'll be really hard to integrate those insights. So, setting an intention is really setting an anchor and then allowing the process to unfold the way it's going to unfold. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slides, but making sure that we're using what we set as the intention to also integrate after the experience. And to be clear, an intention and an expectation are very different. If you want to flip to the next slide, Niko. So I'd also suggest screenshotting this as well, but intentions are meant to be more purpose-driven, open-handed, and process-oriented statements that we can anchor to. Expectations are usually more focused on some outcome, some attachment to how we want it to go, really certain, really result-oriented, and typically pretty judgment-based. And so I actually love the analogy on this intention slide here where it says we have a sailboat and we're plotting the direction of where we're going, but we're working with the winds as we're getting to the destination. The destination, right, is the intention. We don't necessarily know how we're going to get there, but we have a general idea of where we would like to go. An expectation is really thinking like, I'm going to be able to predict every single wind that comes. I'm going to know every single piece of this equation as it happens. And if it doesn't happen that way, I'm going to feel really disappointed and frustrated. And I think the difference between intention and expectation, especially when you're in the journey, is being able to consistently release yourself in the surrender of like, this isn't going the way I thought it was going to go. And I'm open to how it's going because I know that at the other side of this, there will be something that I can take away from it. And I think that's a big piece of knowing the difference between intentions and expectations. And we're actually going to do a little exercise
Woo.
to set an intention right now for the day. So you want to switch to the next slide?
Yeah, and we're
So
at the halfway mark for our journey today in this webinar. So just a time check there, but we're doing great.
perfect. Cool. So intentions are not specific to psychedelic work. You can set an intention for the day. You can set an intention for a workout class, truly anything. So I want us to all take the next 30 seconds, use these starting phrases, may I, I'm willing to, or show me, and just write one sentence, specifically one sentence. We'll talk about this in a minute. What you want your intention to be for the day. We're at 30 minutes, so we'll go till 30:30. And if you want, you can plug it in the chat, but no pressure. Amazing. Okay, let's switch to the next slide. If you have your phrase written down, I want you to look through it and see if you have any expectations hiding inside of it, like will, must, should, outcome oriented, not leaving space for the magic to unfold. Just take another 20 seconds. Amazing. Okay, we'll call it there. So, the entire point of setting an intention in one sentence with these open ended, sort of hands open phrases like may I, will I, show me, or show me, we allow ourselves to see that it's about the process. It's not about predicting the outcome or having a need for it to look a certain way. And I call this the one sentence intention test for a reason. So, as you're going through the experience, having one sentence is so much more efficient and helpful to anchor to than having, a three-sentence dissertation of what you want the experience to happen. And you'll start to see that one sentence doesn't allow a lot of room for you to predict how it's going to go. It leaves a lot of room for openness. So, this is just a great practice when you're going into a journey. There's much more that goes into setting an intention for sure, depending on what you're looking for. But this can be a really good practice of practicing just keeping it open ended.
I love seeing some of these examples in the chat right now from Andrew. May I be attentive to the subtleties of being present in the moment today. It's beautiful.
That
And
is beautiful.
Anthony's intention is show me what haven't been seeing. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
goosebumps.
Yeah, and you can see how they're open to open the curiosity up, right? Paying attention. That's a big piece of the experience. Okay, a little bit more logistically, what to know about dose, because a lot of people have questions about this aspect. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about the dose. The dose can be up to 50 milligrams in the regulated space, both in Oregon and Colorado. 50 milligrams is 5 grams of psilocybin. But that doesn't necessarily dictate the experience that you're going to have. So if someone wants to have the most profound experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to take the full 50 milligrams. The dose really depends on a lot of factors, and it's something that you'll collaboratively discuss with your facilitator going into the experience and also decide on the day of what you're actually going to take. And a big piece of what this depends on is your prior psychedelic experience. What you've done before does definitely influence how you're going to interact with the medicine again. In a more spiritual sense, psychedelics, and just especially plant medicines, have a relationship component. So there's this idea that when we are relating with the medicine over and over again, we create and form a different and a stronger relationship with the medicine. And that can influence the experience and how much you take. It's also a matter of your comfortability with intensity. Some people don't necessarily need the most intense experience is not going to be the most beneficial for them because they're going to feel really stressed, really like their nervous system will feel really overwhelmed. The brain is incredibly smart and will, if that is you and you're not someone who likes intensity, you'll probably have a more profound experience at a lower dose, knowing how your nervous system will react. If your nervous system shuts down in the experience, it's kind of really hard. It'll be much harder for you to change the direction and sort of come out of it from that lens. And then body sensitivity. It's not necessarily about your weight or, how big you are or any of those things. It's a matter of how sensitive you are to the world, to things like alcohol could be an indicator of how sensitive you are to psilocybin. Even some people have like really strong sensitivities to like Advil and ibuprofen and things like that. So just really taking into account all of your sensitivities, not just your like your body weight or your size. It's a whole spectrum here of what it actually depends on. So this is something you'll discuss with your facilitator, and then the dose also the type of medicine, the type of psilocybin that you're taking also matters here. I won't go too far into that, but your facilitator will sort of walk you through that as well. And
Lex,
then
just before you move on here, the top question on our question poll from Ken right now is any information you might be able to share on the effectiveness of microdosing or low dose psilocybin. Most of what we've talked about today has been large doses. So yeah, could you just share a little bit on microdosing?
Yeah, totally. Microdosing is completely different than macrodosing. So the idea around microdosing is that you're taking lower doses of a psychedelic over time on a schedule. It's a cumulative process, not just like I took it one time and now I'm fully changed. It's more of take the medicine, integrate as you go, take the medicine, integrate as you go. And I would say, as far as effectiveness goes, it follows a lot of the same structure as a high dose journey. There's a lot of preparation that goes into microdosing, but it's on an ongoing basis. And there's a lot of integration that goes into microdosing, but it's also on an ongoing basis. So your neuroplastic window isn't as, how do I explain? It's not as long as like you take a microdose and you have 21 days of the neuroplasticity opened up. It's like a smaller amount over time. And so people who are doing a microdosing protocol are typically trying to change something in their daily life really intentionally, whether it's how they're relating to their partner or their relationship with, food or things like this, right? Where they can focus on it in the moment over time, typically with working alongside someone like a coach or a therapist. And they're using the daily insight of the subtleties, and that's a big piece of this. It's a lot more subtle. They're using that insight to influence their behavior. So they're increasing that neuroplastic window over some might microdose for up to 3 months, but it's at a smaller rate. But it can be really intentional if you're working with the medicine incredibly intentionally, like you would in a high dose journey.
Yeah, and just to add from the research perspective, there hasn't actually been a lot of research done on microdosing because it's difficult you can't have someone sit in the lab for a month while they're microdosing and measure different
Mm.
things. So there hasn't been a lot of research done on it. The research that has been done has been, low populations or harder to control. But anecdotally, there are a lot of people using microdosing for things like productivity and creativity or to actually replace antidepressants or anti-anxiety type medications as well. And so it is something that people have found a lot of help with. But as Lex mentioned, I would definitely look at microdosing in a similar way of being very intentional with it and working with a professional so you can dial in the dosage appropriately and make sure you're having the right windows of being on and off the medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly important. And to not do it for long. I don't let my clients do it for more than 3 months at a time, just to
Cool.
state that. And the contraindications to high dose psilocybin and even microdosing as well, since we're sort of on that topic too. If you're on lithium or any antipsychotics, you are not a candidate for doing a psilocybin journey, as well as if you have active psychosis, suicidal intent, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, or you have pre-existing heart conditions. Psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, are stimulants, so that can activate things like that, just making it unsafe. So these are things that you'll get screened for. We'll talk about this a little bit further down when we talk about how the regulated model works. You get screened for all these things so that no one falls through the system. But these are important to sort of self understand if you are a candidate for this type of experience.
And Lex, there's another great question here from Ken on what about antidepressants like SSRIs, SNRIs? Are these contraindicated for psilocybin therapy?
They're not, no. SSRIs specifically are they're safe to use alongside like a high dose psychedelic experience like psilocybin. I will say it just changes how your body interacts with the medicine. So people who are on SSRIs might need a higher dose of psilocybin to get the same experience and the same effect, or they could have a pretty neutral, like they're both SSR, they're both serotonin inhibitors. So if they come together, they can like cancel each other out. And so if that happens, it can be pretty common for someone to have like a pretty low, small experience, which happens. So certainly there are facilitators who help in our or who are more equipped to deal with these types of clients, and in the sense of, talking with your psychiatrist or just in general about doing a psilocybin therapy model alongside these medicines. If your goal is to, let's say, come off of these medications, they can work with your psychiatrist to help you do that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we've definitely heard from people who are cautious about talking to their psychiatrists and therapists about psychedelics. In our experience, much of the mental health world has been following this research. It's something that's discussed, very openly. And even if your practitioners, if your psychiatrist is not someone who offers this medicine, they're likely well aware of how they work and their benefits, and would certainly be empathetic and to you trying these things out. And if not, they're a trusted source for you to actually lean on and discuss why with them. But in my experience, the medical professionals have really been opening up to these types of medicines. We work with the University of Colorado's med school, who is really excited about, their Department of Psychiatry is really excited about these medicines, and are actively running a clinical trial on them right now, and are well equipped, even in that university setting, to discuss options with their patients.
Yeah, thank you.
Ooh, okay, cool. Let's dive into legal aspects of this and cost, which is kind of a nice segue there from that last question. And also, I've really been enjoying the questions coming in and us kind of addressing them. So you keep using that questions tab for things that you want us to dive into. Um, but I want to start by going into, is this legal? The quick answer to that question is no. From the federal government, these medicines, all psychedelics, are Schedule 1 from the DEA scheduling perspective, which means that they are classified as being harmful, having high addictive properties, and don't have any therapeutic benefits. That's what the DEA says, but the FDA actually has a lot of contradicts that a lot, because the FDA has specifically fast-tracked psilocybin and psilocybin analogs for the use of depression through clinical trials. And so the third point here, FDA clinical trials, there's a lot. There's 60 or so clinical trials happening right now using psychedelics to treat various forms of mental health conditions. So you can certainly look at clinicaltrials.gov and find these clinical trials all over the country at different sites. What we focus on at Althea is helping people work within the state licensed model. And so there are 2 states right now that can do this. That's Oregon and Colorado. Oregon has been up and running for a couple years now. Colorado is launching right now, and so we are scheduling folks right now in the Colorado space. The legislators in New Mexico and Iowa have also recently passed bills. This diagram here is a little outdated, since these literally happened in the past couple weeks. But in the coming years, we're going to see New Mexico and Iowa create programs that are similar to what Colorado and Oregon have stood up. There are also a number of groups that are actually registered as churches and use psychedelics as sacrament in their within the church. And so there's a very much a spiritual component to these types of medicines, and they have historically been used as sacrament in a number of religions. Some evidence even suggesting that early Christianity had psychedelic sacraments. So there are, I think, four now churches that have an official approval from the DEA to actually be using these as sacraments, and there are many hundreds of churches who use the Religious Freedom Act as a potential defense uh, for using psychedelics as sacrament. And then, of course, there are many countries that these medicines are welcome in, and so there are retreats that run in Central and South America, in the Caribbean, and of course, all over the world. So you might find opportunities in retreats as well. To dive deeper into that specific um, state model, I'll pass it back to Lex here to kind of talk through how that process unfolds.
Yeah. So with the state regulated models in Colorado happening, like Nika said, currently up and running or happening now, and then Oregon has been up and running, the first step of the entire process is to choose a facilitator or a center that you want to do the journey with. And this is a big piece of what we at Althea help people get into, is to help them find a facilitator match. We'll talk a little bit about why this is so important in the next slide, but just to give you a brief overview, who you sit with while you're journeying matters greatly, especially when it comes to safety and trust and how deep you're going to go. The reason that psilocybin therapy is a little bit or a lot different than MDMA assisted therapy, but the reason that MDMA assisted therapy requires the therapist to be present throughout the process is because that is where the magic happens within the relationship. And so, though psilocybin is a little bit more, it's a little different, it's a lot more internal, there's still an element of having that relationship with someone that matters greatly. We are social beings at the end of the day, so it's an important piece of the equation. Second, you have to go through the mandatory medical safety screening and regulatory prep paperwork. There's a lot of forms to fill out as you're going through a legal journey. All of this information gets de-identified and then reported to these state models every quarter. And so it's just to make sure that everything is running smoothly and that, again, we're tracking what the outcomes actually are and if people are safe and all of these things. So that is one piece of the equation that you'll have to run yourself through when you go through this legal model. And it's really, again, to keep you incredibly safe.
And if I could just interject here, this is actually where Althea as a company started. We develop a software platform for facilitators and centers within this space to actually walk their clients through the medical and safety screenings, to do the regulatory paperwork, and more importantly, to measure outcomes. And it's through that understanding that we gain by helping out these practitioners that we actually help match people with the proper facilitators. And so if you're someone who's looking for someone who is focused on depression or anxiety, we can help find facilitators that are not only experienced in that, but also have great outcomes with folks who have come before you. So I just wanted to do that little plug there to kind of give you the context as to how we're actually doing matchmaking at Althea.
Yeah, beautiful. The next piece of the equation is before you ever journey, you're required to go through preparation. It's part of the regulated model, like we talked about that 3-act journey model. And so preparation varies from facilitator to facilitator. How they do it can be different across the board, but they are required to do, I believe it's at least 90. Niko, can you fact check me on this? Is it 90 minutes or 2 hours?
I'm not sure what the time requirements are, but they're required
Okay.
to have a session.
They are. Yeah, they're required to prepare you, to help you set your intention, to go over all of the logistics, to answer any lingering questions or curiosities before you ever ingest the medicine. And so those sessions are, like I said, they're different across facilitator to facilitator, but still required as part of the entire cost breakdown. Then you have your facilitated journey. This is the in-person session. Actually, let me jump back to preparation sessions. This all happens virtually. So if you're someone who's traveling out of state, you do not have to be in person for these preparation sessions. The facilitators will just meet with you virtually and prepare you that way. Then we go into the facilitated journey, which happens in person. It is 5 to 8 hours, depending on how long you metabolize. And it's done at a regulated and certified healing center or service center, depending on which state you're in. The facilitated journey is obviously the meat of the experience itself. And to keep you safe, you are not allowed to leave the center until your facilitator signs off that you are safe to do so. So that's also a piece of the equation. And then lastly, you have your post journey integration sessions. This also varies from facilitator to facilitator. It's also done virtually, but this is to help you discuss any insights, any like lingering questions that you have from the journey that they can start to help you unwind your integration plan and how to bring the medicine lessons into your daily life. And as mentioned, so finding a facilitator, we hone in on this a lot because it is one of the most important pieces of the experience. The facilitator and your safety are integral to the transformational experience you're going to have. If you don't feel safe, you will not have the experience that you're looking for, which is a big reason why this legal model is created. It's meant to eliminate a lot of the questions and a lot of the safety concerns of like, where did the medicine come from, and is this person trained, and what happens if I have an emergency? The idea is that a lot of those questions are eliminated so that you can actually focus on what you're there to do. Some things to consider when you're finding a facilitator, if you are going this route, is gender, experience, training, anything that feels important to you in that regard. A lot of the facilitators have clinical backgrounds. A lot of them are psychotherapists, they're counselors, they're social workers. They've done this work for years and years with human relating and helping people, and they have found their own stories and their own paths to psychedelic healing that have brought them into this world. And so in Oregon, it's a facilitator cannot run under their clinical license. It's separate, but they still have the clinical informed approach that they have from their obviously years of experience. In Colorado, they actually can operate their psychedelic facilitation under their clinical license. So there's such thing as a clinical psychedelic facilitator. And so it's really just what's important to you. Some people, that's incredibly important. They want to know that someone has this background, and other people would just prefer that to be more ceremonial alternative medicine style. So in our Find a Facilitator form, that the link is below this, you get to sort of choose what's important to you when you're being matched. You'll also want to ask them, like I was talking about earlier, what their preparation and integration sessions look like and what their process is like. Do they offer, additional sessions? Do they offer additional sessions on, especially in integration, or are they available for additional hire if you need extra support? These are great things to ask, and as well as like what their true processes are like. Running through the safety and emergency protocols, they will run through that with you, but just making sure that you are aware of what could possibly go wrong in the experience so that you are knowing as you're going through the medicine, and the medicine will amplify everything as you're in it. So knowing these things ahead of time is really important and can eliminate them actually even coming up, which is great. And then also how they maintain ethical boundaries and comfort. This is a big piece of the psychedelic equation that we are not blind to. And knowing that you're under the influence of medicine, and having a rapport with your facilitator to eliminate these ideas that could come up during the experience, again, can just help you get deeper into the experience itself and just maintain your safety and comfort throughout the experience itself. And I like to always ask why, or what's their story behind their work. A lot of the facilitators and people who work in this space are in the space because it has impacted them in a way that they feel like really drawn to help other people with. So I would suggest asking their why and finding resonance. You don't have to ask them their whole life story, but even just their why behind why they got into this work and what is important to them could help create that deeper connection with them. And lastly, vibe check. Just feeling how you feel around them is really important. If you meet with someone and you get an instant gut feeling that there's something off or something doesn't feel right, trust that gut feeling. Again, these medicines are amplifiers. So if that is present in preparation or in the intro session, it will only amplify as you go through the entire experience. So just feel how you feel around them, and make sure you take into consideration what that is. I think you're muted, Niko.
Okay, I'm back. Um, really want to touch on the cost breakdown because that's probably what a lot of folks are wondering. Um, as we've discussed, it takes a lot of time and effort from a trained facilitator to work with you through this process. And so they charge fees of around between $500 and $2,000 is what we've been seeing in the regulated space. They actually have to administer the medicine in a service center or a healing center in Colorado, in Oregon. And so the room rental fees there are a couple $100, and then the medicine itself, you have to pay for with cash because it's federally illegal. But this all breaks down to a cost of typically around $1,000 to $3,000, depending on who you work with and where they're at. There are many people who operate with a sliding scale. You can reduce your cost by doing it in group settings, and there's actually some evidence showing that doing this in groups can actually improve therapeutic outcomes. And then we also created a fund with Althea to help pay for psychedelic journeys. And so I threw the link there at the bottom right now. If you are someone looking for financial support, you can apply through that link for our forward fund. Um, I do want to mention though that therapy in general is expensive, and the common quote in the space is that done correctly, psychedelic therapy can feel like 10 years of talk therapy in one session. I've certainly felt that in the sessions I've done, and it's largely because um, you can really understand what the therapist is trying to tell you. You can get the message better than than in a normal kind of state. So some things to consider there. I know we are running up on time and we've been answering questions as we've been going. So that has been nice. So we're going to skip the Q&A section here and wrap it up. But if there are more questions that are still in there, we can stay on for an extra couple minutes and address those. But we wanted to just share some resources that we have available, and some next steps if you're interested in kind of continuing down this path. So Lex, tell us about Find a Facilitator.
Yeah, so on the Althea website, which Niko will drop a link to just below this, you can fill out the Find a Facilitator form. It's a pretty short form, just generally assessing what you're looking for from the experience, what your preferences are from a facilitator, like we were talking about, if you want someone who has clinical background or if that's not as important to you. And anything else you want to share about what you're looking for, with the intention of us helping you get matched with licensed and vetted facilitators that are in our network. And a big piece of this is that there are a lot of people that are facilitating this work, but it's sometimes more difficult to find them. And so we're helping you bridge that gap and make that process a lot easier and feel more friendly. We'll warm intro you to the facilitators that you want to meet with, and then help you along the process as you're deciding if this is a good match for you. We also had mentioned at the beginning of this the psychedelic preparedness scale assessment. So if you haven't filled that out yet, test yourself and take that to see if you are or how prepared you are to do a legal or even a psychedelic experience in general.
And I would just mention we didn't come up with the psychedelic preparedness scale. It was developed by researchers at University College London and has been validated to show higher therapeutic outcomes with higher scores on the preparedness scale. So it's a really cool tool that really gets into kind of what to expect.
Yeah, and has really informed this last option for support. So, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of people know that the experience is profound and the outcome is unexpected. They don't know what to expect, but they don't feel like they have the preparation in place or the resources to prepare so intentionally. And so, we've created a preparation circle, and it's going to be a 2-month weekly meeting virtually where we help anyone who's interested in potentially journeying. They have a date, etc. Really, all come one, come all. You don't have to have a journey on the calendar. Helping you prepare so that you can get the most out of the experience. Preparation is truly one of the most important pieces of the equation. And if you can prepare really well beforehand, your integration will be a lot more easeful.
Yeah, and
And
with this prep circle, we're really excited to bring a community together of a few people who are trying to figure out how and if they want to access these medicines. So we've put together a program here at that link. We are charging $120 to join this prep circle because we're going to intentionally build a community there. Lex will be facilitating the group, working with you on a regular basis over 2 months. And if you do choose to move forward and do a psychedelic journey via Althea, that we connect you to your facilitator and help you find that match, you can reduce that cost from the journey itself. So it's an investment on figuring out if you want to make that happen for you. So I've posted the links in the chat. Check them out there. And with that, we're gonna wrap it up, and we'll wrap it up by like adjourning, and then we'll dive into some of these questions that are in the chat for a few minutes here. I just want to thank everyone for coming out. And if you're interested in hearing the answers to some of these questions, stick around. Otherwise, we'll let you loose on your Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone.
Great. So the first question I want to get back to is, it sounds like so Heidi had a question earlier around how we actually choose what facilitator we refer people to. And we talked about choosing a facilitator, but I think that she wanted us to go into a little more detail on like literally how do we actually help people choose the facilitator that we're going to recommend to someone. So yeah, can you just dive into that process a little more around how that works when someone says, I want to work with someone? Like how do you Lex actually figure out how to what facilitators to connect them with?
Yeah, I feel like it's two-part. It is what they're looking for specifically. I look to see, if someone is wanting clinical support or they want a blend of both. I look to see and vet from our community of facilitators who fits that. And then from there, because those are some of the most important things, I also look at they're what they're looking for support in, right? Like we have specific facilitators who like really specialize in like trauma and people losing loved ones and things like this. So if someone is working through that type of challenge or type of challenge in their life, I'll look for facilitators who explicitly have that experience and honestly want to work with those people. I think that's a big piece of this as well. The facilitator and client matches is a match on both sides, where we have facilitators that want to match with clients that are working through certain things and vice versa. And then sometimes it's a gut check. Sometimes I'll meet a client and we'll have a conversation and I'll be like, oh, this would be such a good fit for insert facilitator name. And I'll intro them that way.
Yeah, and Heidi, thank you for continuing to clarify your question around how do we actually approve them? So the process on the facilitator side is they actually apply to work with us to be matched with clients. That process includes them completing a profile where we can learn more about them. Lex has a meeting with them to meet and to actually do that gut check of like, would we actually personally sit with these people? They have to be licensed, which means they've gone through a comprehensive training program and a practicum where they've sat with other licensed facilitators to learn how to do this well. They have to be working within this regulated space, and they have to be measuring outcomes within our system. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're actually using those outcomes measures to better understand if they're making the impact that they want to be making, that they should be making in this space. And so it's a combination of all of these things that we use to actually vet and determine if we're going to work with certain facilitators. They do not pay a fee to be a part of that facilitator group. If we do match them and they end up working with a client, then that's how we make money, is by helping to make that transaction happen and manage the payments across the platform.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question here from Aliona. Apologize if I said that incorrectly. But yeah, a bit of information on psilocybin journeys in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live. So I'm excited about the opportunities that are opening up here in Colorado. In Boulder, there will be a few healing centers that open in the coming months. Nothing is open yet, though. And so we have to kind of keep our eye out for places that will emerge here. it's something that we should follow up with you on as they open, because right now they're in these healing centers are in the application process, and so yeah, we can't say if and when they're going to be established, but I can say for sure that we will have a few in Boulder. I've also heard of some in Lyons and kind of in the surrounding areas in nature as well. So there will be facilities in Boulder. We work with a group that is was the first healing center that's in Denver right now. So that one is kind of a for sure it's going. But many of the other ones are still in that application process. And so we're actually going to have a way on our website for where you can actually try to find the different healing centers if you're looking for a geographical location. Let's see here. Do you see psilocybin becoming legal in other states other than Colorado and Oregon in the near future? I mentioned it earlier that Iowa and New Mexico are um, working through the process, but these things take time. So it depends on how we talk about near future, but I think that the New Mexico timeline is 2027. Their program is slated to launch, which means between now and then, we're going through a rulemaking process for them to actually figure out what the rules of the program will be and how they're going to do licensing and things like that. Iowa might be on a similar timeline, maybe even after that. Um, we are seeing other states contemplate these types of programs as well, and they might come out with things that have less rulemaking attached to them. So it might happen that we have another state come online sooner than these. I know California has gotten through legislature a few times, and it was vetoed at the governor's desk, but it'll come back around. I expect in the next 5 years we're going to see 5 to 10 states that have programs, at least um, getting through their regulatory process.
Yeah, and to add color to that too, it's what we're doing here in Colorado is very different than what was done in Oregon. And so I think that will also dictate how states approach this moving forward.
We have a question here on our business model. Do we charge a fee for matching people with facilitators? So in Oregon, we do. That's the kind of model that we initially launched with. Is when we actually make a match for a facilitator, we charge the facilitator, and so they're able to either take it out of the fees that you end up paying with them, or eat the cost if that's how they choose to do it. But we're actually exploring different models on how to generate revenue with this. As I mentioned, we have a platform that facilitators use to stay in compliance and do all the documentation necessary. And we're contemplating if this should just be part of the value that platform offers. And so Althea itself is a new business. We've been around for about a year and a half and are testing out different models on how we can generate revenue through this. Some of the principles that we have around this, though, is that our number one goal is to increase accessibility to psychedelic healing in this space. And so we're trying to figure out ways to generate revenue without adding a lot of costs into the system, because we're certainly very sensitive around how much it already costs, which is why why we created the forward fund and those sorts of things. So our revenue model is going to be evolving in the years to come, but yeah, we're all figuring out as this industry emerges. So we'll figure it out. And then I answered in the comment earlier, but there will be a replay available right after we're done. After I hit like done on the session, it'll be available at the same link, and so we'll also post it on our website, so it'll be kind of evergreen there as well, so people can access it. And with that, we've cleared up all the questions in the queue. So that was awesome. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for joining, everyone, and thanks for doing that with me, Lex. That was a fun journey.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm gonna figure out how to turn this off, and we'll wrap it up. But yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good one.